Good morning. I'm Jody McIlrath, and I'm from Florence Township in Frontenac, Minnesota. And thank you for inviting me here today. I'd like to introduce our panel. And we have Lenny, is it Shier? Lenny? Lenny's not here?
Oh, I'll go get him. He's out.
Okay, thank you. Ken Schmitt, Travis Mossman, Forrest Nutter, and Jim Drost. Very good. Oh, and Pat Schaefer, I'm sorry. And the topic today they're going to give you brief examples of negative impacts on our communities. Do we have our other panelist?
They're coming. He's coming.
Okay. What we'll do is save the questions till the very end after they've given their 5 minutes. So write your question down if you have one for a particular person, and then we will make sure that that question gets answered. If we run out of time, what we'll do is suggest that you perhaps catch up with them at lunchtime. Okay, and Lenny is here now. And Lenny, how do you pronounce your name?
Shier.
Shier. Thank you very much. All right, with that, let's begin. Lenny, you're the first one on.
Thank you. I'm Lenny Shier from the village of New Auburn, Chippewa County, Wisconsin. My neighbor wrote a book, and on their face page, she put Silica, Wisconsin. She changed the name. I bet you within 5 miles of where I live, there's 5 plants. But I do have a PowerPoint presentation I'm working on because my other one wouldn't transfer this thing here to this other computer. And I call New Auburn a bedroom community, but no longer. It is in between Rice Lake and Chippewa Falls, Eau Claire on Highway 53. I moved to that community many years, well, about 10, 11 years ago. The rail system there was going to be thrown up and made into a trail, like a lot of northern areas. It was used a very little bit to get some rail up to Rice Lake and stuff like that. And my wife had bought 2 pieces of property there. One of them is at 147 West Pine Street. And I encourage you to take that address and punch it into Google. And you'll hear about the nightmare I'm going to talk about. Sand has been evil to us in my point of view. The sand plant, Rich Shier, not related to me, it's spelled different, of Superior Silica Sand has talked about being a good neighbor. And what a shame he is not. Progressive Rail, Kyle the Vice President, and he has failed to be a good neighbor. Our government has failed to be a good neighbor and a responsible government to its citizens because of greed. New Auburn is not a bedroom community anymore. There is a citizen there that used to be on the county board of Chippewa Falls that used to claim about the sand industry has made New Auburn a booming community. It is decreasing. A lot of the facts that I get are from my neighbor and other citizens in the community, but I also live there. I dreaded winter leaving us because I have storm windows up. The windows are closed, and I live in the air-conditioned, or the heated area. But now that spring is here, my windows are open, the fugitive silica sand is coming into the house. You can see it as you do put it there, as you dust. I have a cough sometimes that my wife thinks it's, and she does too, that sometimes it's the sand. You do not see it. I have had people take their storm windows off after winter, and they find that sand seeped in between that storm window and their regular window. Now think of the noise of that sand plant that was in the township, but on the north edge of New Auburn, and they annexed to the city, the village, because they were closer to the village hall than they were to the township hall. Wow, you know, an excuse. But again, Barron County even though I live in Chippewa County, we're right on that line, was going to do some changes and make them pay for maybe that loss of value of homes. And they decided to annex to the city. That's what I'm hearing. It is not a good community anymore. There's one gas station, it's profit, you bet. Some people didn't have jobs, they got jobs, good for them. You know, it's not about me being at this level of the financial ladder and you getting better and up there. Great for you. But you know what? At what cost of my quality of life? I got an 82-year-old plus veteran that lives in that community with half a lung. And if my neighbor, who I do talk a lot about, and I'll tell you why, goes from 1 inhaler to 3 inhalers, and guess what? When you got insurance, you got to fight those little beggars to get that insurance going. He's a school teacher, she's a stay-at-home mom, she does medical transcriptions, they have 3 kids. They are walking away from their house, and they're good neighbors, and 3 good kids. You know, kids are kids. But again, here are kids that I've kind of grown up with for 10 years. I know them better than my daughter, my son, because my daughters and kids live away. But again, they pulled these 3 kids out of the school district this year, New Auburn School District, and I'll tell you about that one too. They're walking away from their home. 10 years, he told me the other day, of good mortgage payments to the bank. And he went to the bank and told him he's walking out. He's basically thought he lost already $40,000 in home value from that. What a shame. And then here sits my wife and I with 2 pieces of property. And one of them is in front of the Superior Silica Sands plant. Okay, so that's what's going on. But what goes on is also the school district, and that's the one I really want to touch on. The sand plant does have its own monitor system, but what a great gauge when you hear from the community members that the filter system in the school system is not trapping all that silica sand. And twice, members have gone to this school board and have been ignored. These sand companies toss money here and there for iPads, trip to Washington, D.C., and they're buying you. I call them Judas coins, you know, for those that believe in the Bible. You're buying your way through this community on little nickels and dimes, and then here's a school board doesn't care about its kids. How sad. And with almost the end, I mean, there's more. I'm out here today, and again, think of the quality of life that has been just shot down. It's sad. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny. All good points. Our next presenter is Ken Schmitt on sand mining and family farm concerns in the town of Auburn. And we're counting you too.
I didn't prepare too much today. I'm going to keep it very short because I'd rather get to the questions and answers. I think that's probably a better direction to go, perhaps, at least for me. My wife Laura and I have a grass-based cow-calf operation in town of Howard. We're just a week short of 5 years that we've been involved with this issue since the proposal first came to the public's eye back in 2008 in town of Howard. My wife and I were married in 2004. I moved up from the Neillsville area to Chippewa County, and we have 4 small kids. The direct impacts on us personally right now are not that great. We got to put up with trucks and stuff, but we're kind of insulated from it. We're a ways away from the mine, but there are definitely major issues. We have probably one of the better mining companies in the town that's out there. It's EOG Resources. They started out with all new trucks last year, and as far as trucks go, were quite quiet and stuff. However, a year into it, now those trucks are no longer new. They're about halfway to the junk heap. Now you can hear brakes a half a section away from them when you come up to the stop sign, which that's at the farm, the house is a mile away, doesn't really affect us, but there are people on the haul route that have a stop sign living in an intersection. They get to listen to the brakes both ways on those trucks. Is that being a good neighbor? Not hardly. And I want to add one little thing to something that Jeff said before about energy return and energy invested, because to me these numbers are very interesting. A little over 100 years ago when the oil industry first started in this country, we got 100 units of energy back for everyone invested in energy return, energy invested. Now we're at 20 to 1. And I believe it's in 2020, the projections are it's going to be 5 to 1. Now fracking, the return on energy invested is 3 to 1. So what does that tell you where we're going? I don't think it's a real pretty picture down this path, so it's above my pay grade to say where we're going to end up, but I can see problems coming in the not too distant future. Those numbers do not indicate that we're going to have plentiful, cheap energy from the fossil fuel arena going forward. And I think that's something that we as a society need to start to address and to look elsewhere sooner rather than later. That's all I'm going to say right now, so. Okay.
Thank you, Ken. Very good. And you gave someone else some time, so that's great. Our next presenter is Travis Mossman for Outdoor and Tourism Impacts on Mining.
13 years ago, my friend and I, we started a project called the Trempealeau Trails Bicycle Loop System, and this was what our book looked like. And this was a coloring contest for the kids ages 6 to 10, what's it look like to ride a bike through your town. This project grew from 7 loops initially to 14 loops that took up 380 miles of our paved back roads, 3 cars hour traffic, you know, something like that. The next year grew to 14 loops, and now I think there's 17 loops of 480 miles out there in the county back roads. And about in 2011, an article came out in Bicycling magazine about our bike loops, and all of a sudden we have a bed and breakfast in Whitehall, so I have a better idea of how many and where these bicyclists are coming from. We started getting calls from Hawaii and Canada and New York and Washington, D.C., and Washington State, and Kentucky, and North Carolina. And you go, holy crap, this is really going someplace. Yes, we're winning. Something's happening in this sleepy little town. And then all of a sudden you hear sand mining, and you go, ah, you know, it's just one of them sand mines, right? Oh, there's another one. There's another one. Uh-oh, there's another one. So you go to the county and say, where are these things? And they say, well, they're in these books. Oh, well, do you have a map? No. Don't you think you oughta? Oh, yeah. Well, give me that book. Start circling these places. Holy crap, they're all over my bike routes. Oh, man, how many trucks are these things? Oh, well, we got to get you that information, too. 4,000 trucks? Are you kidding me? Where are you getting these numbers? And, oh, my God, what are you doing? We're finally making it. Our sleepy little community is going to be internationally famous. I've got 2 people from London coming on Monday. They're blowing it. They're absolutely blowing it. Thank you. Nobody? I don't know. I'm done for now.
Thank you, Travis. Very, very interesting, especially on the biking issues. Our next presenter is Forrest Nutter on law enforcement and the effects of mining.
Thank you. I've been involved in law enforcement training for about 25 years, and prior to that, I worked primarily in narcotics for the state of Wisconsin. And my interaction with small-town law enforcement has been pretty significant. And realistically, that's where the problem lies with the sand mines. It's small-town law enforcement. The issues really that are going to most severely interact with the public and law enforcement is going to be the annexation of mines into these small communities. And you can look at Taylor, you can look at Blair, you can look at the issues around Independence and Whitehall and Arcadia. And the biggest problem we have with law enforcement is the fact that these small-town agencies have neither the expertise nor the manpower to deal with the mines. When you talk about the sand mines, you talk about major industrial sites and the potential for large-scale problems. Yes, we do have our emergency government at the county level to deal with some major problems, but our small-town agencies, and I can take the example of the Blair mine, they have no idea about the issues of the DNR and the water issues, and even the potential of large-scale industrial accidents. Blair is a one-horse town. Blair is a one full-time law enforcement officer, actually a former student of mine, a former military individual who's a very good small-town chief. The problem lies with the fact that he has neither the expertise nor the manpower to deal with the Blair mine. And in talking to Tim on several occasions, one of the most significant issues or concerns that he has is waiting for it to happen. Now Blair is kind of an exception to the rule, I believe, in the sense that roads were not annexed. So really it was just the mine itself that was annexed. But when you start talking about the annexation of these areas into relatively distant compared to where the major populations are of those communities, relatively significant distances. Now you have one officer who becomes tied up at a mine for 8, 10, 12, 14, 24 hours investigating an accident, and in reality what happens is the rest of the population suffers. That community, and it's contrary to what those people involved with government in the small communities believe. They believe that this is going to bring in significant amounts of money to the community. And in reality, there is some potential, though we know and have heard, and I've done some research into the issue of the tax base not being as immediate as many of these communities initially believed. They are not getting the tax dollars for a period of time, particularly when they're annexed out of townships, which receive financial reimbursement for their loss of tax dollars. Those communities end up in situations where an officer that is supposed to take care of 500 to 1,000 people is now tied up at a site for 24 or more hours in the situation where you have a major problem. And of course that could be an industrial accident, it could be a criminal homicide. These are small communities in and of themselves, and they're far distanced in many cases from the communities. The communities are going to suffer, and honestly, the city councils and the village boards, in reality, they haven't got so preoccupied with what's happening that their heads are lodged up there. I mean, they are more concerned about what they're going to get in an immediate issue financially, not the long term. Having talked to some people that live, I'm involved with an organization called Lions International. And in virtually all of these small communities, there are Lions clubs. And I can tell you that many of the people in these communities are saying to themselves, you know what, we maybe didn't get what we expected. We maybe aren't going to get what we expected. When you talk about the issue of the trucks, for example, and the question of the brakes and things like that, in reality, if the brakes are squeaking on those big trucks, that's an MVD violation. That in and of itself is an MVD violation. I can tell you that none of these small town officers have a clue what the MVD code is. The and that's not because it's not primarily the problem until they have major trucks coming through their communities or in areas that they're responsible for. The issue of covering loads. Talking to small town officers, many of these small communities have part-time officers working, talking to them about covered loads, and their response is, well, if nothing's blowing off, they don't have to cover it. So they don't know. And I tell them, no, look at the law. Well, they can't find a law. It's not a law, it's an MVD code. It's in reality the equivalent of law, it's administrative code. So the officers don't even know where to go to look for it. And I'm not faulting the officers, because I can be honest with you in saying that I've trained thousands of small town officers, and in reality, that's not their primary responsibility. Their primary responsibility is literally everything from the small crime in a small community to just simply dealing with the people and the interactions at the local tavern and things of that nature. So in reality, what we have is a large problem simply because the governmental bodies don't think ahead.
Thank you, Forrest. That truly is a problem in our small towns. And our next presenter is Jim Drost on mining metallurgy, developing a plan for reporting mining violations.
I wasn't quite prepared for this part of it. My preparation is for the extensive documentation of the pollution or what have you. But in this part, I have to take a lead from Mr. Abbas, and there's a lot of negativity in preparation, how much money you spend to get a gallon of oil. And he did not speak of how much water is being destroyed for every gallon of oil. Now, I grew up in Barron County, Wisconsin, 3 miles northeast of New Auburn. And there lies a large marsh, almost 1,500 acres of marsh that's wildlife and what have you. I have now documented with my twin brother at least 4 contaminations of that marsh. But to get on to what's costing us water, we got alcohol that's being produced from corn. It's supposed to be renewable, it's supposed to be green. It costs more money. And petroleum, more gallons of petroleum to do 1 gallon of alcohol. We spend more gallons of diesel fuel than we get out of that corn and alcohol. Now the next thing is for that alcohol, there's 780 gallons of water used on the irrigation to get 1 lousy stinking gallon of alcohol during the irrigation growing season. That amounts to 0.04 cents per gallon of water. Now we look at the Ogallala, which much of the fracking is being done from Texas to South Dakota. In that area, in 1998, the Ogallala aquifer had 978 trillion gallons of water. By 2012, it was down, and it was 240 foot was the level, the average level of that aquifer. By 2010, pardon me, it was down to only 80 feet, 1/3. We now only had roughly 330 trillion gallons of water left, and down to 80 foot. Last year, 2012, it is now down to 60 foot. We have 4 or 5 years left at the rate they are using the water for irrigation and fracking. 3 to 8 million gallons every time they frack a well. You're going to see water here more expensive than your miserable gallon of gasoline or whatever. And that is the major cost in Barron County, Trempealeau, Eau Claire, where it be. These people are going into areas that the groundwater cannot support 350 gallons per minute. And for the average fracking company, 300 tons per hour is what they wash. Each ton of sand requires fresh water of 140 gallons per ton. When you take that for a whole year, and they don't run a whole year, so I'm cutting it back, but 325 million gallons of fresh water have been destroyed for the average sand company. That's all I got to say, and I'll say the rest for later.
Thank you, Jim. All good information for certain. Our next presenter is Pam Schaefer, Midwest Environmental Advocates Attorney. Freedom of Information Act, Moratoria, Annexations, and more. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you. I only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to really focus mostly on the and more part. You've heard a lot of bad things that are happening, and I'll share a couple of those things, but I want to end with how do we fight back? Because I want people to walk out of here thinking, oh man, this is bad, but we got some tools. Some of the things that are happening in Trempealeau County, which is where MEA has primarily been active, is that we are challenging some of the air permits that have been issued by the DNR because they're not protective enough of the citizens that live near these mines. We have filed a contested case request for preferred sands against that mine and against that permit. It's working its way through the court system. The things that are wrong with these permits are that the modeling the DNR doesn't accurately predict the amount of dust that's being produced that's going to harm people. And they refuse to require ambient monitoring at the PM 2.5 level, which is for the small particles. So we're challenging that. We're challenging it on another mine that's being proposed outside of Arcadia. We're trying to push the DNR to do the right thing. Preferred sands mine is particularly problematic because what's going on in Trempealeau County is that the county had a pretty good ordinance. It was controlling hours of operation, decibel levels, things like that. And the frac sand mines realized, well, we'll beat that. We'll get this little town of Blair to annex us. We'll fool them into thinking that this is a great thing for them economically. And then what we'll do is we'll get them to reduce the amount of the bond on the reclamation. I was at a public hearing in front of the city council maybe a month ago where they adopted the new reclamation plan from their newly annexed preferred sands mine. And then the guy who's supposed to be working for the city to manage this got up and said, well, you know, I think that this bond of $30 million is way too much. We're going to start recommending you reduce it. So we followed up with a letter saying, yeah, we're watching it. But the problem here is that there's a lot of legal problems. There aren't a lot of people out here who are willing to step up and do this legal work. So please don't all of you call us. But we do want to help you. And one of the things that we would like to try to do is organize the way in which people complain. In meetings with the DNR recently on another mine, the DNR lawyer said, well, we don't have enough real violations or proof of violations. We know people are out there complaining. And within a week or so, we're going to have a little form up on our website that will allow people to start complaining in an organized fashion, giving your name, your address, what you saw, attaching pictures, who you sent it to at the DNR. And we'd like to start getting copies of those because part of what we're doing with the DNR is to try to push them, but in order to push them, we need evidence. And so I'd like everybody here to start thinking evidence. Yes. And if you go out to the table, thank you, Stacy. MEA has a table out there, and if you'd like to get a copy of this form, you can leave your email address and we'll get it to you. And we'd like people to start adopting a mine, look at this one mine, and keep sending us stuff, because then we'll have an organized body of evidence that we can take to the DNR and start saying, look, this is, you got to do your job. A couple of things about annexation in Trempealeau County. As the prior speaker said, and as I've just discussed, the little towns and the cities are trying to annex the mines, thinking that this is going to be a gold mine. What they don't understand is that we're talking short-term gain, long-term environmental pain. And those little bonds that these mines are posting isn't going to be enough to cover the damage to the groundwater and to the other things. And it's very hard to convince these communities of this because they need the money. So that's the downside of annexation. In terms of moratorium, they do work. They're hard to pass. There was one that was proposed in Trempealeau. It was, I think it was last Monday or the Monday before, but it didn't pass. So they're good to do if you can make it work. I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about, let me see if I can get mine. There's so much. Oh, two last pitches. Run for office. What we're seeing is that at the local level, what happens is that all the people on these little county boards and city councils have no clue. There are a lot of older people who've been there for many years, no idea what's going on. Only way that's going to change is that people run for these local offices. So I realize that's a big commitment, but that's really the only way to change it. Thank you.
Before you go, Pam, two questions. One is, would you comment on the overlay ordinance concept and also on the homeland rights concept as two legal instruments that might be used in the future? Does that give you enough to go on?
Yeah. I don't know anything at all about the homeland law, so I can't comment on that. But the overlay ordinance, you're talking about a zoning ordinance, correct? Yeah. There's different kinds of zoning ordinances, and one of which is an overlay ordinance. There's also ways of creating mining districts and things. This is all fairly complicated law, but there are tools that communities could use to try to control where mining takes place. Most of these communities are so interested in the money that, as an example, the city of Whitehall has a city attorney who is working part-time as their city attorney and part-time for a Eau Claire law firm. Well, Riley, Friend, and Ricci, I think. At the same time, the mine that's trying to get annexed in that community is represented by an attorney from the same law firm. Something wrong with that picture. So there's a lot of strange things going on. There are lots of good tools out there, and hopefully soon we're going to have a frac stand toolkit that will describe a lot of that in detail. But all I can tell you is it's a good tool, it's out there, and it can be used.